Oftentimes, as learning designers, educators, we tend to be designed very cognitively, thinking about the pedagogy, the goals, the application, evaluation. And what ends up happening is we end up designing learning experiences that are very logical and predictable. Most trainings would start from relevance and then foundational principles, key concept, and then moving to practice. And our course titles also, they sound like foundations of XYZ and effective principles of communication. Sometimes the worst is we often tend to communicate the key benefits of our training programs using Bloom's taxonomy verbs. It's almost like we forget that they're learners first, they're humans first, and learners secondary. So I guess, you know, it's almost like sometimes we live in our own learning design bubble, and we need to be woken up and see how other fields try to influence human beings, right? And that's why we invited Mike today to explore how folks in marketing captivate people's attention and how marketing folks influence behaviors and what we can learn from it. Let me tell you about Mike Taylor. I think I've personally been following Mike's work for a while and love his practical insights and very innovative approach. There may be few L&D professionals in the world that don't know enough about Mike, but still there are a lot of education guys joining us who may not be familiar with his work. He's an L&D leader with about 20 years of experience. He's an ATD facilitator, speaker, adjunct, instructor at Franklin University. He's also writer of his newsletter called Friday Finds, and is a writer of a book titled Think Like a Marketeer, Train Like an L&D Pro, which will be released very soon, this May. On his webpage, I found he described himself as a seasoned explorer, tirelessly scouring through hundreds of sources to unearth the most brilliant gems for you. And he says, so you don't have to lift a finger, my friend. So, my friends, let's unearth these gems today with Mike. And now I'm going to hand over to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope I can live up to that wonderful introduction. And I'm super excited to see everybody. And I see a lot of familiar names in the participant list there. So I just want to kind of share some things. She mentioned our book that's coming out in May. I could probably talk for days and days about all of the things that learning, training, and education people could adopt from the marketing field. But we don't have time for that. So we're just going to sort of hit on sort of 3 good ones for today. And I'm super excited to kind of look forward to that discussion after we're done here and hear from all of you. But I want to just start off with, if you had dropped this in the chat, I'm curious. I've asked this question probably to thousands of people now. And if there's something that you could steal from the marketing department, what would that be? If just drop that in chat. I'm curious to see. Most people have at least one thing that pops immediately into their mind. And so I will try to keep an eye on that. Maybe we'll come back and look at those here in a second. Get my window so I can see it here. Copywriting skills, influence behavior, storytelling. Yeah, these are fantastic. Corporate buy-in, that's a big one, right? To be free, creative. I love that one. Powerful images, videos, fantastic. All really great stuff. And those are all reasons, or among the reasons why I think we should be looking to the marketing field. If we think about it, L&D and marketing both have important goal in common. And what we're both trying to do is we're both trying to get people's attention and then trying to help them think or act in new ways. So really important goals that we share. But I think most people would probably agree that those two fields have very, very different approaches. So this is an example I like to use as an illustration. If we went to a typical L&D training team and we said, hey, help us sell more hamburgers, they might come back with a design that looks something like this. Whereas if we were to go down the hall to the marketing department and ask them to help us with the very same thing, they're going to come back with something that looks a little bit like this. So if we put these two things side by side, it's a pretty stark contrast. I'm curious, what are the differences here? What kind of things do you notice that stand out for you? Why do we do it differently? And drop your thoughts into chat here, and please feel free to share. And then maybe most importantly, which one of those two are most likely to get you to go and buy a hamburger? Yeah, fact-based, dry, bullet points, logical on the left. Yeah, right, exactly. Marketers make an emotional connection, so it's emotional, it's visual. Like I'm almost getting hungry seeing that hamburger now. I'm gonna be at McDonald's before the day is over. So I think that's really good illustration of the difference, color, clarity, emotions, all of those things. So keep that in mind. And what we're going to do for the next 15 or 20 minutes here is take a look at 3 things worth stealing from marketing. And the first one is illustrated really well by that example that we just saw. And marketers speak to our intuitive brain. So what does that mean? First of all, marketers are really good at understanding probably how human brains work. And so this is a learning researcher, and this is a really spot on quote. So if we don't understand human cognitive architecture, whatever we're doing instruction wise, training wise, learning wise, it's blind. I think that's pretty uncontroversial statement. And there's a really great book, Daniel Kahneman. If you haven't read it, this is one of my all-time favorites. And he has sort of popularized this dual processing theory. And the main idea of that is human thinking and decision making involve 2 very distinct cognitive systems. He calls them system 1 and system 2. I use intuitive, deliberative, it's the same thing. System 1 is very subconscious. System 2 is more conscious. If we compare these 2 things, that intuitive system 1 thinking, it's fast, it's automatic. There's a lot of built-in shortcuts called heuristics, very subconscious, more emotional. So if you've ever been for a walk and you see a shadow move in your peripheral vision and you jump, that's the kind of automatic intuitive processing that's referencing. System 2, the deliberative, it's slow, controlled, it takes a lot of effort, it's analytical, it's logical, it requires conscious thought. So this is, doing a hard math problem. That's why thinking about hard things and doing hard, challenging things like math problems is so tiring. So those are the 2 types of thinking. Now, this is a really, to me, fascinating fact. If we look at the comparative processing capacity of these 2 types of thinking, our deliberative conscious mind can process about 40 bits of data per second, while our intuitive subconscious mind is processing 11 million. So that's kind of a whoa moment for me of the power of how much is happening in our brains subconsciously. And quick side note is most of our behavior is driven by that subconscious side. We make decisions, we take actions based on things in our subconscious, and then we backfill with the logic. So maybe we can talk about that here before we're done, but I want to try to sort of illustrate this just a little bit. And I want to try a quick experiment with everyone. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put some words that are going to be in color on the screen. And in your mind, I want you to name the color of the ink. So not the word, the color of the ink. Hopefully that's pretty clear. So let's give this a try and see if we can have any light bulbs go off here. So let's go ahead and get started. Remember the ink color, not the word. what happened on that last row? Did anybody notice anything different? Curious to hear. Yes, right? Blue is green. You had to think, you can almost feel the brakes, right? Slowing down. I'm like, because your automatic thinking is automatically reading the word, because reading that stuff is an automatic, fast process. So it was probably slower. It probably required some conscious effort. And you can go and try this. This is called the Stroop test. You can find online versions of this, and it will, give you stats of how much slower it is when the words and the colors don't align. And kind of the gist of all of this stuff is, we don't think as much as we think we think. So what is happening in this subconscious mind is we almost have this set of pre-programmed behaviors that are instilled upon us at an early age. And we have most of these by the time that we're 6 years old. So if you think about that, I'm curious to get your feedback on this question. If you're designing for an audience of 6-year-olds, would you do anything differently? What would you do differently? What would that look like? So I'm super curious to hear your responses to this one. There's typically some common groupings, and I'm curious to see if you guys hit those same areas. Simplify, small chunks, bright colors, limited wording. Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. All of those things. More images and words that are appropriate. Yes, Anita, that's fantastic. David, I love that. Moments of enjoyment, humor directly. Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. And so that begs my follow-up question. Of all of those things we mentioned, which of those things do you not like as an adult? Because I like play and fun, and I like simple and colorful and enjoyment. And so really, I think we're not designing for adults and kids, we're designing for humans. And I think that's a really important part. We can do, important, serious things and do them simply in a way that's fun and have a little personality. So that's okay. I think that's a big takeaway as well. And then sort of kind of to wrap up this point, this is a quote from Daniel Kahneman that I referenced earlier. We're really influenced by these automatic subconscious things that we have no control over it, and we don't know that that's happening. So I think that's an important thing that marketers understand probably a bit better than most of us in the learning and training fields. So marketers, they leverage those ways that our brains really operate and the way we process information. So that's the first thing. Second thing is marketers, sort of following up with that influence of subconscious, marketers understand the importance of first impressions. So if anybody has ever had a boss or a client or a project manager say, it doesn't matter what it looks like, just get it out the door. This is your ammunition to sort of push back on that a little bit and sort of explain why maybe that's not such a good idea. So a lot of times, I'm sure we've all seen some version of training that starts something like this. And if we reflect back to that subconscious, what's your intuitive initial reaction, especially emotionally, when you see things like this? Probably, I'm guessing it doesn't get you very excited to see what comes next, right? So there's a bunch of research and science behind this stuff about how much first impressions matter. And what's happening insanely fast is our subconscious minds, they're judging what we're looking at. And that automatic subconscious reaction, which is happening faster than we're even conscious of, it influences the way we perceive the relevance of what we're looking at, the credibility of that, and even the usability. There's something called the halo effect. if it looks good, it is good to our minds. We like to take a lot of shortcuts. So if something looks good, we will forgive maybe some errors or mistakes or some flaws. If it looks bad, we're not so forgiving, and we hurt ourselves when it doesn't make a good first impression. Now, there's data that this is happening in less than 30 thousandths of a second. For reference of how fast that is, it takes about 200 to 400 milliseconds to blink. So, like I said, incredibly fast. And all of that is sort of to make the point that, yes, it does matter what it looks like. And there's another study that talks about those first impressions that are happening subconsciously are 94% related to design. So the key point of this second thing that we should steal is good design is always a smart investment. There's no such thing as no design. So if you think something has no design, it's probably bad. And it's really important to be intentional. There's a whole world of design principles of how do we guide the eye and visual hierarchy, which we get into and we talk about in the book a little bit, and maybe we'll get into in our discussion. Cool. So that's two. So our last one here, our third one is marketers understand that nobody pays attention. So let's unpack that just a little bit here. This is another one of my favorite ads. So I'm going to play this ad. It's just 30 or 60 seconds. And then we'll talk about it. So it's going to have audio. So if you have audio, make sure you're good there. And let's watch this, and then we'll talk about
it. To test just how much attention the attention-stealing design of the new Skoda Fabia actually steals, we left one parked on this ordinary road in West London. We wanted to see if its sharp crystalline shapes, bold lines, and lower, wider profile would attract the desired level of attention. Will the 17-inch black alloy wheels stop passers-by in their tracks? Will the angular headlights attract the attention of other road users? Will a crowd gather to check out its fresh, sporty look?
All right, did anybody see any changes from the beginning of that video to the end of that video? We'll see if everybody is awake and paying attention, or if we've put them to sleep already. Okay. All right. Good. No worries. Yeah. So Molly, that's probably your subconscious is sensing something, but we can't consciously. Yep. Somebody walked. That did happen. Okay. So I'm going to give you a second chance. So let's watch the second half of this video and see if we see anything different.
Well, not quite. But did the attention-stealing design distract you from noticing that the entire street has been changing right before your very eyes? Don't believe us? Have another look. Did you spot the van changing to a taxi? How about the scooter changing to a pair of bicycles? Or the lady holding a pig? Let alone the fact that the entire street is now completely different. Didn't think so. So there we have it. Proof that the new Skoda Fabia is truly attention-stealing.
So David, I think you win an award. I think you might be the first person who's ever spotted the monkey up on the roof. And so what this illustrates is this idea of inattentional blindness. There's an original version of this. There's a video called The Invisible Gorilla, which displays the same concepts. And we have this intuition. If I had told you, I'm going to play a video and the entire street's going to change and you're not going to know it, you would have probably thought I was crazy. And so we have this intuition that we're going to design things that are quote unquote obvious, that nobody can miss, and that's really consistently wrong. People miss things all the time. So that's really important when it comes to, are people paying attention to what we want them to pay attention to? And, the moral of the story here is important visual information. It can and does and will get overlooked. So we have to be aware of that. And really, if we don't have that initial attention, then nothing else that comes after that matters. Could be the best thing in the world. If nobody's paying attention, you know, it might as well not exist. And here's a big news flash that I think we probably already know, at least intuitively, if we don't, you know, maybe say it out loud. But nobody wants to read our stuff. Nobody's calling me every day. Hey, what you got anything new in the LMS? Like, it's just not the way people work. But don't take it personally, because nobody wants to read anything. It's, you know, it's the way that we're wired. There's a really fantastic book called Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit. Steven Pressfield is the author. It's really short and sweet. If you have access to it, I think it's pretty inexpensive. If you buy it, grab it from the library. It's really great. And the gist of this is streamline your message, pare it down. I used to work at an agency, and we would always say unpacking. We need to unpack this a little bit more so that it's as easy as possible for people to understand. And he says, if you do that, and then in combination, you make its expression fun or sexy or scary or interesting or mysterious, you know, those emotional things that we were talking a little bit about earlier, will make it compelling so people will want to lean in and read your message. So if you can do those two things, apply that to everything you're doing, you're probably going to be pretty successful. And, you know, I've taken the liberty to add a third thing. And I think if you can make it visual, that will support both of those first two things. So visuals can help you streamline your message and bring in that emotional element that just text just cannot do. So if you can do those three things and apply it to everything you do, make it streamlined, make it emotional, make it visual, you're probably going to be pretty successful. So that's a sort of quick whirlwind tour. Three things. There are many. Like I said, I could talk for days about all of this stuff. So to recap, talk to the intuitive brain. The key is our mind doesn't run on logic any more than horses run on petrol. I love this. Rory Sutherland is a great marketing person to follow for a lot of this stuff. If you ever get a chance to see one of his talks, they're fantastic. Second thing is make sure you're making a great first impression. So invest in good design. That first second with your content might matter more than all of the rest that follow. And that's if there are any that follow. And then the important part that we just saw here about grabbing and holding attention, and we can't assume that we have it, and we can't assume that something is obvious that nobody will miss it, because I guarantee you somebody somewhere will probably miss it no matter how obvious it is. And it's really important that if it doesn't capture our attention, it might as well not exist. So kind of wrapping up here before we get to questions and discussion stuff, we mentioned the book that's coming out on May 27th. You can subscribe and get updates. We're writing articles, resource guides, templates, all kinds of stuff related to that will be available for free. And then finally here, if you want the slides, if you want my contact information, you can go to that site and I will send them all to you. That'll come automatically. I don't sell anything. I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just trying to share the stuff that I have and make it available. So I'll pause there, check in. Do we have any questions or anything that I missed in the chat, guys?
There's quite a few popping up, Mike. Lots of questions from participants also, but I'm going to start with some, a little bit, like you said, unpacking myself. And then, guys, feel free to type your questions on the chat. Just in about a couple of minutes, we'll start taking your questions as well. But Mike, can I ask you one question and since you said the first second matters more than any other seconds that follow, let's talk about first impressions and how you or your teams have created a great impression. I guess concrete examples of creating that might help us unpack this.
Yeah, so in a former life, it's been 10 or 12, maybe more years ago.
And we can stop sharing the screen, I guess, just to see you.
Yep. Okay, yep, great. So probably about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, maybe even more, I worked at a big corporation, and some of those places have annual compliance courses. Everybody in the world's got to take them. And our IT department put out this 90-minute, I don't even remember the topic. I just remember it was super painful. It was 90 minutes long. It opened with about 15, here's the mission, here's the purpose, like all of this just garbage. And I kept the screenshots of it because it was so bad, and I knew I would use it as an example of what not to do. So it took 90 minutes. It didn't work. They didn't understand their audience. So we were a power company. So we had power plants in rural locations with 64K internet connections. So all kinds of problems. And most of that started with not understanding their audience. And so we asked if the people in our organization, if we could redesign it. And so I redesigned it. It went from 90 minutes to 11. So we freed up 80 minutes of time. And if you do the hourly rate and the math on 30,000 people, like that's $1 million savings right off the top. And the thing of it is we didn't cut any content. It was just all the extra garbage. And we took it from text and bullet points. We made it visuals. We've slashed the content, so there's 9 times less content, which obviously is going to make your message come through more clearly. And so, lots of things like that. There was also another course that I did that started as a text PDF document. It was about identity theft. So instead of how to protect your identity, we took that and we made it a story, and we put a picture of a guy that I called Shady Grady, and it taught them how to steal people's identities. And it's all the same learning objectives. It's flipped, and it's unexpected, which will grab people's attention. And it's much more fun because nobody's going to read, the 12-page PDF document. So things like that again, anybody can do, and it's just the perspective and the mindset that you approach it with.
That's brilliant, Mike. It reminds me of a game called Bad News, where it's a game to educate people on misinformation online. And essentially, as you're playing the game, you have to spread bad news, and it really teaches you so much about, how fear induces that. And so it sounds very exciting. Mike, my second question to you is really, and that's something you touched upon when you were asking this question about how would you design for a 6-year-old, and we realized that actually adults need the same kind of learning experience, right? Which is simple, it's colorful, it's straightforward. And so I want to ask, many L&D professionals also believe, so there is this belief about how children learn differently from adults, but also we believe that frontline workers or people with low reading levels need more simple, clear cut, that kind of design, unlike more mid-level and senior professionals. So what's your take on this? Having designed for both the groups, do you see a real difference in how we should approach learning for kids versus adults, but also frontline workers versus leadership?
Yeah. So kind of back to what we talked about there, we all liked all of those things. I think most of us here, the simple, the colorful, the things we talked about. And the real difference, it's not how we present the information, it's the context we use for it. So for example, if I've got to train everybody about a particular process or process improvement, and I've got maybe factory workers and leadership executives, the ideas are the same. It's the examples that change that match their daily work. So, an important point here is, simple doesn't mean dumbed down. And Apple's a great example of this. They've got this crazy complex technology that they make easy to use, and they don't lose any influence by simplifying things and making things easy. And simple is not easy. If anybody's ever tried to do that, I think people can probably relate. So, that's our goal. The messaging is the same. It's all simple. It's easy to process. Our brains all work the same way. So, those are principles that work for everyone. And that has nothing to do with, what your job title or job role is.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. We were having this conversation about pedagogy versus andragogy in one of the meetups in learning design. And as professionals, we also realized that, for those who've designed for both the audience, it's actually very similar principles that you apply if you're creating a great design. Okay, I have two more questions and then we'll also take participants' question. My next one is, what are some of the most effective marketing inspired strategies or tools which learning designers can adopt? So I think you talk about personas, journey mapping, learning campaigns in your work. If you could describe a few that we can take away.
Yeah, so like I said, I could talk about this for days. So picking just a small numbers is hard, but I just start with, it's really the mindset that's most important, and it really boils down to being learner centric in everything that we do. So, for example, to take it to sort of marketing tactics and strategies and stuff, we talk about personas as a way to really get to know your audience. So that's, not just their job titles, but, what are their challenges, what drives them, what are their hopes, what do they feel, what are they trying to do? And when you get some understanding of people at that level, you're naturally going to create better learning experiences. I think a lot of times some people tend to skip that and we want to jump straight to creating content. But if we don't have that important context, it's probably going to miss the mark. So again, if I'm trying to speak to the CEO the same way I am the frontline person in the factory, there's probably going to be a miss for both. So it's the one size fits all actually means one size fits none. So understanding your audience, whether that's personas or whatever time analysis you're doing, is the first one. Another one is thinking in campaigns instead of courses. So reaching people when and where they need the information. So that could be a quick video or a checklist or, small timely pieces spaced and located in the places that people already are. So in L&D terms, a lot of people call it in the flow of work. So it's better than a course, which is, sort of that, again, one size fits all kind of thing. And it aligns with L&D stuff, blended learning, performance support. It's just getting out of a course mentality and thinking of a campaign, like a marketing campaign. Marketers would never put up one billboard and then stop, because that's not effective. And then the last one, what we've been talking about a bit here, is just designing for how our brains actually work. Use stories, visuals, try to inject some emotion to make things get attention and stick. And then, like we just said a second ago, keep it simple and clear. Everybody appreciates simple and clear, easy to understand. There's a lot of research around cognitive fluency that, for the learning nerds, we could get into that, but it's the same concept. And then the beauty of all of this stuff, like I said at the beginning, is you can do this starting right now. Doesn't matter what tools you have. It's really, understanding and connecting with people is what this is all about.
Right, brilliant. Getting out of course mentality, I think that's really important. Mike, I'll close with just talking about some of the limitations, right? So let's face it, no matter how fun we make learning, it's hard to compete with cat videos on Instagram. Deep learning requires intellectual struggle, and learning is not always fun, easy, or necessarily appealing to our learners. So can you share some limitations or cautions of sort of adopting like the marketing approach and thinking, okay, this is going to solve all our problems? Or
Yeah, one of the most common pushbacks that I hear is, oh, it's like salesy or pushy, or I'm putting lipstick on a pig, I'm just making it look really nice. And it's really, you can't do all of those things. You still have to be able to deliver value. It's like, if we put it in marketing terms, it's like if I have a product that's really bad and breaks, all of the marketing in the world is not going to solve that, and you're not going to be successful. So you've got to be able to combine both of those things, the attention and the color and the stuff, but you've all got to be ultimately have to deliver the value, or people are never going to come back.
thanks, Mike. That's an important thing to remember. And with that, I think there are quite a few questions that are connected to this, right? People thinking about how will this apply to my context. So Miriam, I'm going to pass on to you. Let's take other participants' questions.
For sure. Mike, thank you so much for this. It's been so valuable, and I can't wait to go back to the recording and really listen to this and take it in even more. I've grouped our questions into categories, and just because we've been talking a little bit about learning, I'll start with that. There's a question from Teresa who's asking, what are the best tips for adding the emotional part that you spoke about earlier during your presentation?
Yeah, I think the best thing for that ties to, knowing your audience or knowing your learners. What things do they care about? What struggles are they facing? If one of the best ways to get people's attention is to make it relevant and useful to them. So, in the book, we have a model. The acronym is SURE. So SURE. So simple, useful, resonate emotionally, and then depending on the format, easy to scan. So let people find what they're looking for. And again, those are all mindset things that anybody can apply.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question that just came in, which I think ties a little bit to this, from Mana, who is asking, when you mentioned an example like turning that 12-page PDF into and something that was essentially 11 minutes, how do you ensure that you don't lose the core message or information when you're also optimizing on the brevity?
Yeah, and so that is that's something that obviously is critical. We don't want to lose important parts. So, part of that is partnering with experts. Part of that is just having that mindset of, it's almost like a minimum viable product. How short can I make this and still get the message through? There is a really fantastic framework, and they've got some resources and workbooks around learning this, but Axios is a news organization here in the US, and they have this concept of smart brevity. And they've got a whole model that's kind of backed by science and stuff that is fantastic, that will help you sort of drill down. There's three parts to it, sort of the, what's happening. It starts with opening, and you put sort of the takeaways at the top. It kind of ends with, why this matters. So I'm a really big fan of that model, and just sort of being brief and using brevity everywhere. Because I know we've all seen these, right? I open an email and it's a screen full of text. I can just feel the energy drain from me, and nobody wants to read that stuff. So, being brief but effective is a skill set that's really worth aiming for.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you think this approach would work for abstract topics or concepts as well, or maybe heavy ones?
So heavy ones for sure.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, we can do serious, heavy things, and it doesn't have to be boring. That's okay. Abstract is a challenge, right? So our brains, we like concrete things that we can get, that we can understand. So abstract things are a challenge just by the nature of what they are. So trying to find, if you can find a contrast, maybe it's an abstract thing, but if you can find something to contrast it to, anything that kind of try to make those fuzzy concepts as concrete as possible, is going to be a lot more brain friendly and understandable and memorable for your audience.
Okay, that makes sense. We had someone who was wondering how you could apply that to software training, for example. Like, I hear what you're saying, but maybe we could use that as a concrete example.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. That's pretty common. And so I think I see software training and they say that this is the file menu and this is the edit menu, and they're going through features as opposed to what are the roles that what are the jobs people are trying to do that are using that software. So instead of going to the file menu to go to new to create something, what are you doing? Like, I'm trying to submit an expense report. If I'm an employee, use that as your scenario that's relevant, that matters to people, So I wouldn't want to give the same exact training to an employee who is submitting expense reports as I would the managers who are approving them, because it's two totally different jobs. And as an employee, I don't care about the approving because I'm never going to do it. Right? So the manager, they may submit expense reports, so they may need both, but they're probably doing a lot more approving than they are submitting. And so back to that context that we mentioned, that's the difference, not the way you present it.
That makes a lot of sense. And we have a really good question from Islater, I hope I'm saying that right, who's asking if you're in a big corporation where there is SMEs that are very much set on including as much content as they want to, and that they're meeting all the stakeholder demands for, say, policies and strategies to be included. How would you navigate a situation like that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I would say, one, it's amazing what you can get away with when you call something like a beta or a test or a trial. So, hey, we're going to take this one little small thing and we're going to try a new way. So we'll just call it a beta. We'll have a little test group, right? And so it just astounds me. Oh, it's just a test, or go do whatever you want. We don't care anymore. So that's one thing that has worked well for me. The other thing is if you fight that battle and end up losing, there are ways. Let's say, for example, we'll go back to our expense report example. And you're doing an e-learning course, and the expert says you got to put everything in there. Every last detail of the policy and procedure has got to be in there. Well, you can build your course so that that policy and procedure is in there, but maybe it's tucked away on this little tab over here. It's in the course, but I'm not going to force everybody to go there and suffer through it. So, you can design things like that. So maybe that's an optional thing. It's in there, it satisfies the SMEs, but I'm not going to force anybody to go through that because we know they're not going to read it anyway.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind. I really like how you use the beta idea, because you're really selling them on giving things a try without it feeling like a concrete end of the world kind of situation. I have one last question, which is from Anil, who's asking, what are your go-to tools for creating visuals?
I'm a huge fan of Canva. I use Canva almost every day, and they just keep adding amazing stuff. And I won't say that you can't make ugly things in Canva, but it's hard. So I'm a huge fan of it. I would pay for Canva. I'm on a pro account. I would pay for Canva just for the assets, the illustrations, the icons, the photos and videos, just for that, because it's a massive library. And a lot of times what I do is, I'll go and search one of the big stock photos, iPhoto, whatever, Shutterstock, and I'll copy the keywords there and then paste that into the search in Canva. And a lot of times it's in Canva for free, as opposed to $10 or $20 or whatever they're charging.
I totally agree. We are also big fans of Canva at the LDC. We love it.
Even the free version is great, but it's worth
whatever
it is, 10 or 12 bucks. It's a no-brainer to me. And
Totally
I don't make a commission. I wish I could be one of their ambassadors or something, because I like it that much.
Totally agree. Thank you, Mike. This has been so helpful. Shraddha, I guess that was the last question on my end, so back to you.
Oh, thanks a bunch, and thanks for taking the time to answer all of them, Mike. I think there were questions coming from, I could see, from education and then from the L&D space as well. So yeah, it was really helpful. Is there anything else, Mike, that you really want learning designers, educators, and L&D folks to know or to stop doing? Something that frustrates you as you look at like some bad practice?
Well, I've said this a couple of times, and I would just end with, like, anybody can do this. Don't be intimidated. It really is a mindset. And we all see commercials and ads all the time. Like, look at those with the new eye of like, hey, what are they doing? And how might I use that in what I'm doing? So we're surrounded by ads and commercials all the time. Just start to stop and pause for a minute, like, oh, that's a great idea for a design layout, or I like what they're doing with this, the way they're pulling in emotion. And so if we just kind of take that new perspective, then, we can all make these improvements pretty easily.
That's a great thought, Mike, to leave with. And thank you so much for sharing these amazing insights with us and helping us get out of our, instructional design bubble to see how to truly captivate attention and how to truly, influence people and their behavior. So that was very helpful.